I feel like I've been walking around with a knife in my back for 3 years, and I only just now looked down and saw the handle. That's the best way I can describe it. Not the pain, yes, there was pain, but that specific feeling of realizing something catastrophic has already happened and you're only just now finding out about it. Like your body knew before your brain did. I was sitting in my condo in Jomtien when the phone rang. It was a Tuesday. I remember because Tuesday was the day the maid came, and I was annoyed that someone was calling during her time there because I didn't want to seem rude by talking on the phone while she was cleaning. Stupid thing to remember, isn't it? The day my life imploded, and I'm worried about being polite to the cleaning lady. The voice on the other end was Thai, heavily accented English, and she was from Krungsri Bank. She was calling about a missed payment. I told her there must be some mistake. I didn't have any loans with Krungsri. I'd been careful about that. After my divorce back in Manchester, I'd sworn I'd never mix my finances with anyone else's ever again. That was the whole point of retiring to Thailand. Fresh start, clean slate. No complications, she insisted. She had my passport number. She had my address. She said I was a guarantor on a loan that was now 4 months in arrears, and they needed payment immediately or they'd begin legal proceedings. The amount she quoted was 9.7 million baht. I didn't know what 9.7 million baht was in pounds. I had to ask her to wait while I opened the calculator on my phone. My hands were shaking. I kept hitting the wrong numbers. When I finally got it right, the number that came up was 217,000 pounds. I asked her to repeat it. She did. Then she said there was a second loan, different account, 2.1 million baht. That was another 47,000 pounds. I remember putting the phone down. Not hanging up, just putting it down on the table and staring at it. The woman's voice kept talking, tinny and distant, asking if I was still there. The maid was in the kitchen. I could hear her humming. The ceiling fan was making that clicking noise it had been making for weeks. I'd kept meaning to fix it. Everything felt very far away and very close at the same time. I need you to understand something before I tell you the rest of this. I know what you're thinking. You're thinking I'm an idiot. You're thinking I should have seen this coming. You're thinking, how does a 66-year-old man, an engineer who spent 40 years working with specifications and tolerances and precision, how does he let himself get taken for 264,000 pounds? But you have to understand, it wasn't like that. Or maybe it was exactly like that, and I'm still making excuses. I don't know anymore. What I do know is that when you're in it, when you're living it, every decision makes perfect sense. I met Fern in September 2019. I'd been in Thailand for 8 months by then, living in a serviced apartment in North Pattaya, trying to figure out what retired life was supposed to look like. The divorce had been finalized 2 years prior. My ex-wife got the house in Didsbury. I got the pension and the savings, 340,000 pounds after everything was divided up. The company pension would pay me 1,800 pounds a month. I'd done the math. In England, that meant a 1-bedroom flat and penny pinching. In Thailand, it meant a sea view condo and a life that felt, for the first time in decades, like mine. Fern worked at a shopping center in central Pattaya. She was at a jewelry counter, not one of the touristy places on Beach Road, but a proper Thai gold shop where local people bought wedding gold and investment pieces. I'd gone in because my watch battery had died and there was a watch repair stall next to the gold counter. She helped me. Her English was decent. Not fluent, but better than my non-existent Thai. She was beautiful. I'm not going to pretend that didn't matter. 30 years old, long black hair, one of those smiles that made you feel like you were the only person in the room. I was 63. I knew how this looked. I knew what people would think. But when she gave me her line contact and suggested we get coffee, I told myself, this was Thailand. This was how things worked here. Age gaps didn't mean the same thing they did back home. We started seeing each other. Coffee became dinner. Dinner became movies. She'd finish work at 6, and we'd meet at Terminal 21 or Central Festival. I paid, obviously. That's how it works. She was making maybe 15,000 baht a month at the gold shop, about 350 pounds. I was pulling in 1,800 pounds from the pension, plus I had the savings sitting there. It felt good to be generous. It felt good to be with someone who seemed genuinely happy to see me. My ex-wife Sarah, toward the end, she'd look at me like I was something stuck to her shoe. Fern looked at me like I mattered. By December, 3 months in, she'd started staying over at my apartment most nights. She kept some clothes there, a toothbrush. The relationship felt real. It felt substantial. I met her mother in January 2020, just before COVID hit. They lived in a small house in Chonburi, about 40 minutes from Pattaya. The house was, well, it wasn't what I was used to. Concrete box, tin roof, no air conditioning, except in one bedroom. Her mother was maybe 50, spoke no English, worked at a rubber glove factory. Fern's younger brother, Somchai, was there too, early 20s, unemployed, spent most of his time on his phone. The mother was polite to me in that Thai way where you can't tell if she likes you or if she's just being polite because that's what Thai people do. Fern explained that her father had died when she was 12. Motorcycle accident. No insurance. Her mother had raised her and her brother alone. They'd been poor. Really poor. The kind of poor where you wear the same school uniform for 3 years and you water down the fish sauce to make it last longer. Fern had dropped out of school at 15 to work. By the time I met her, she'd been working for 15 years. Half her life spent behind a jewelry counter selling gold she could never afford to buy herself. I gave her mother 20,000 baht that day, about 450 pounds. Fern hadn't asked me to, but I could see the state of the house, the cracked tiles, the rust on the gate, the way her mother's face looked tired in a way that wasn't just from a long day. Fern cried when I handed her the money to give to her mother. She said I was a good man. She said her mother had never had anyone help her like this. I felt like a hero. I really did. For the first time since the divorce, I felt like I was someone worth knowing. Then COVID happened and everything got strange. Lockdowns, curfews, borders closing. I couldn't leave Thailand even if I'd wanted to. Fern moved in fully. It made sense she couldn't get to work anyway, and her mother's house was too small for everyone to be locked down together. We spent 5 months in that apartment. At first it was nice, domestic. We cooked together, watched Netflix, had sex in the middle of the day because why not? But then the money started getting complicated. She wasn't working. The gold shop was closed. She had no income. I was paying for everything: rent, food, electricity, her phone bill, money for her mother. It added up. Not in a way that felt alarming, just in a way that was noticeably more than I'd been spending when I was alone. I was going through maybe 2,200 pounds a month. That was 400 pounds more than my pension. I was dipping into savings, just a bit, just temporarily. When things opened up and she went back to work, it would balance out. Except when things did open up, she didn't go back to the gold shop. She said they'd let her go. They'd kept the more senior staff and cut the junior people. She said she was looking for work, but the economy was bad. Everywhere was cutting staff. She was on her phone a lot, messaging people, looking at job listings. I believed her. Why wouldn't I? In the meantime, I kept paying for things. What else was I going to do? Kick her out? Tell her to go back to her mother's house and let them all starve? That's not the kind of man I am. By the end of 2020, I'd spent about 35,000 pounds more than I'd taken in. The savings account that had been 340,000 pounds was now 305,000 pounds. It wasn't alarming. It was COVID. Everyone was spending more than usual. But there was a feeling in my chest, a small knot of anxiety, that I couldn't quite shift. I started checking the account more often. Every withdrawal felt heavier than it should have. In January 2021, Fern said she wanted to marry me. We were in the condo. It was late at night. She was crying. She said she loved me. She said she wanted to be my wife. She said in Thai culture, if you're with someone for more than a year and you're not married, people talk. Her mother had been asking. Her brother had been asking. She felt ashamed, like she was just my temporary girlfriend, like I didn't respect her. I didn't know what to say. Marriage hadn't been on my mind. I'd been married before. It hadn't worked out well. But I looked at her crying, and I thought, what's the harm? We're already living together. It's just paperwork. And if it makes her happy, if it makes her feel secure, isn't that worth something? We got married in March 2021. Small ceremony at the Amphu in Chonburi. Her family was there, a few of her friends. No one from my side. COVID meant I couldn't get anyone over from England, and I didn't really have friends in Thailand yet. I gave her 400,000 baht as sin sod. That's the bride price. About 9,000 pounds, her mother cried. Her brother shook my hand and called me Phi, older brother. Fern wore a white dress she'd bought at Central, and she looked beautiful, and I felt, for a moment, like I'd done something right with my life. 2 weeks after the wedding, Fern said she wanted to buy gold. Not cheap gold, but proper investment gold from a shop like the one she used to work at. She said in Thai culture, married women wear gold. It shows their husband values them. It's also an investment. Gold holds value, and if there's ever an emergency, you can sell it. She wanted a necklace and a bracelet, 3 baht weight total, about 45 grams. The shop quoted 130,000 baht, around 3,000 pounds. I said yes. I didn't like how much of the savings was disappearing, but I told myself this was normal. This was how marriage worked. You make compromises. You invest in your partner's happiness. She bought the gold. She wore it sometimes when we went out to dinner or to visit her family. Mostly it lived in a safe deposit box at the bank. She said it was safer there. I didn't argue. A month later, she wanted to buy more. A ring this time, and another bracelet, 2 baht weight, another 2,000 pounds. I said yes, but I was starting to feel uneasy. She said her friends were commenting on how little gold she had. She said it made me look cheap. I didn't like that word, cheap. It reminded me of how Sarah used to talk about me toward the end. Here's where I need to be honest with you and with myself. I saw the pattern forming. I saw that every few weeks there was another reason to buy more gold. Her aunt got married. She needed a gold gift to give. Her mother's friend had a birthday. Gold earrings were traditional. Songkran came around. She wanted to buy gold for merit making. Each time it was 50,000 baht, 80,000 baht, 120,000 baht. Each time I said yes, because what was I going to say? No, you can't honor your aunt? You can't participate in your own culture? That would make me the asshole. That would make me the cheap farang everyone warned her about. By the end of 2021, I'd bought approximately 850,000 baht worth of gold. That's about 19,000 pounds. I remember the number exactly because I finally sat down with a spreadsheet and added it all up. The savings account was down to 268,000 pounds. I'd spent 72,000 pounds in 2 years. My pension was covering normal living expenses, but every time there was a gold purchase or an emergency or something that needed fixing, it came out of savings. I told myself I needed to put my foot down. I needed to say no to the next gold request. But then I didn't, because I was scared of the fight. I was scared she'd leave. I was scared of being alone again. In February 2022, Fern said her brother needed help. Somchai wanted to start a business, a motorbike taxi thing. Apparently he needed to buy a bike, get the license, join a co-op. It would cost 120,000 baht, about 2,700 pounds. She said if I helped him, he could start earning money. He could help support their mother. It would take pressure off everyone. I said no. I actually said no. I said I'd already given enough to her family, that Somchai needed to figure it out himself, that I wasn't a bank. She cried for 2 days. She stopped talking to me. She slept on the couch. On the 3rd day, I gave her the money. She hugged me. She said I was the best husband in the world. I felt like shit. Somchai never started the motorbike taxi business. Or if he did, I never saw any evidence of it. But that doesn't matter for this story. What matters is that by mid-2022, I was hemorrhaging money and I couldn't figure out how to stop it. The savings were down to 240,000 pounds. I was 65 years old. I'd worked for 40 years, and I was watching my retirement fund evaporate in real time because I couldn't say no to a woman 35 years younger than me who cried whenever I questioned her spending. I started avoiding looking at the bank account. That's how bad it got. I'd check my pension deposit to make sure it came through, but I wouldn't look at the savings balance. I didn't want to know. Ignorance felt safer than knowledge. If I didn't know the exact number, I could tell myself it wasn't that bad. I could keep pretending this was sustainable. The thing about gold shops in Thailand, and I didn't know this until much later, is that they offer credit, not like a credit card, more like a payment plan. You pick out the gold you want, they calculate the total cost, and then you make monthly payments with interest. The interest isn't crazy, maybe 12–15% annually, but it adds up. The gold shops love this system because they're selling gold to people who can't actually afford it, and the customers love it because they can wear expensive gold immediately without dropping a lump sum. Everyone's happy, except the guarantor, if the customer stops paying. I didn't know Fern was using credit. She never mentioned it. Every time she came home with new gold, I assumed she'd either bought it with money I'd given her or saved up from. I don't know what. I never questioned where the money was coming from. I just saw her wearing new bracelets, new rings, new necklaces. She'd show them to me and I'd say they looked nice, and that would be the end of the conversation. I didn't ask how much they cost. I didn't ask where she bought them. I didn't ask to see receipts. You have to understand, asking those questions would have meant admitting I didn't trust her. It would have meant admitting the marriage was transactional. I wasn't ready to admit that. I'm still not sure I'm ready to admit that. What I learned later, after the phone call from Krungsri Bank, was this. Starting in April 2021, 1 month after our wedding, Fern had been buying gold on credit. She'd used my passport as guarantor identification. She'd signed documents with my name, or someone had. I'm still not entirely clear on that part. The lawyer I eventually hired said it's not uncommon. The gold shops want guarantors because it means they can chase someone with money if the primary buyer defaults. Fern was making minimum payments for the first year, about 15,000 baht a month across 2 different accounts at 2 different shops. That's 350 pounds a month. Where that money was coming from, I don't know. Maybe she was skimming from the cash I gave her for household things. Maybe her mother was helping. Maybe she had some other income stream I never knew about. The payment stopped in December 2022, 4 months before the bank called me. I'll never know why she stopped paying. Maybe she ran out of money. Maybe she didn't care anymore. Maybe she'd planned from the beginning to default and let me deal with it. The bank's first letters went to an address I'd never heard of, some house in Chonburi that apparently Fern had listed as her primary residence. I never saw those letters. The bank tried calling her phone. She didn't answer. They sent someone to the address. No one was there. Finally, they called me, the guarantor, at the number on file. That's when I found out. After I hung up with the bank, I sat on the couch for about 2 hours. I didn't move. I just sat there. The maid finished cleaning and left. Fern wasn't home. She'd gone to visit her mother that morning, said she'd be back in the evening. I tried to process what the bank had told me. I tried to make it make sense. But it was like trying to force together 2 jigsaw pieces that clearly didn't fit. The numbers were too big. The deception was too complete. How do you hide nearly 12 million baht in debt from someone you live with? How do you spend 264,000 pounds on gold without the other person noticing? Then I realized maybe I had noticed. Maybe all those new bracelets and necklaces, all those times she came home wearing something I hadn't seen before, maybe those were the evidence. I'd just chosen not to ask questions, because asking questions would have ruined the fantasy. The fantasy that I was a good husband, that she loved me for me, that this relationship was about more than money. I went into the bedroom and opened the safe where Fern kept her gold. This was a small safe, about the size of a microwave, bolted to the floor of the closet. I'd paid for it. I knew the combination because I'd set it up. Inside were velvet boxes and plastic cases, all containing gold. I started taking them out. I counted them. 14 necklaces, 21 bracelets, 33 rings. I didn't know how much gold this represented. I didn't know the weight, didn't know the purity, but I knew it was a lot. More than any normal person would own, more than I'd thought she had. Each piece was stamped with a shop logo, 3 different shops, all in Chonburi and Pattaya. I took photos of everything. I don't know why. I just felt like I needed evidence. Evidence of what? I wasn't sure. That I'd been lied to? That she'd betrayed me? Or evidence that I'd been complicit in my own destruction? I put the gold back in the safe. I closed it. I sat on the bed. I think I was in shock. Actual shock. The medical kind, where your body stops processing information correctly because it's too overwhelming. I felt cold even though it was 32 degrees outside. My hands were numb. Fern came home around 7 that evening. She was in a good mood. She'd brought somtam from a stall near her mother's house. She asked if I wanted dinner. I said we needed to talk. The tone of my voice must have told her something was wrong, because her face changed immediately. She got very still. I asked her about the gold. I asked her about the loans. I showed her the numbers the bank had given me. I asked her how long she'd been planning this. I asked her if any of it had been real. She didn't deny it. That's what surprised me. I'd expected lies, excuses, tears, but she just sat down and looked at me and said, "You don't understand Thai culture. In Thailand, the husband takes care of the wife's family. This is normal. I was helping my mother. I was helping my brother. The gold is investment. When we sell it, we get the money back. You're making big problem for nothing." I told her the gold was bought on credit. I told her she'd defaulted on the payments. I told her I was legally responsible for 9.8 million baht in debt because she'd used my passport as guarantor. She said she didn't know what I was talking about. She said the shops must have made a mistake. She said she'd paid for everything with the money I'd given her. I showed her the bank statement from the loan account. She looked at it for maybe 5 seconds and then said, "This is not my problem. You are the husband. You fix." I don't remember much of the rest of that conversation. I know I raised my voice, which I almost never do. I know she started crying, which she did often, but this time it felt different. It felt performative. Like she was crying because she was supposed to, not because she was actually upset. I asked her how much gold she'd bought on credit. She said she didn't remember. I asked her if she'd forged my signature. She said the shops had filled out the paperwork. She'd just signed where they told her to. I asked her if she loved me. She didn't answer. She left that night. Packed a bag, called someone to pick her up, didn't tell me where she was going. I assumed her mother's house. She took the gold from the safe, all of it. Every necklace, every bracelet, every ring. I heard her in the closet doing it, and I didn't stop her. I just sat in the living room listening to the sound of velvet boxes being stacked into a bag. When she walked past me on her way out, she said, "You are same as all Farang. You think you can buy Thai woman with little bit money, and we stay forever. I already tell my mother you are stingy man." She agree. "You deserve this." The door closed. I sat there until 3 in the morning. At some point I fell asleep on the couch. When I woke up, the first thought I had was, I need to call a lawyer. Finding a lawyer in Pattaya who speaks English and understands Thai family law and isn't a complete crook is harder than you'd think. I went through 3 consultations before I found someone I trusted, a Thai woman named Sutita, who'd studied law in Australia and ran a small practice near Second Road. I showed her everything. The bank statements, the loan documents the bank had sent over, the photos of the gold, the marriage certificate. She looked at it all very carefully and then she said, "You have 2 problems. First, your name is on the guarantor documents. Second, the gold is gone. You cannot recover the gold because it's not in your name, and she can claim it was a gift. You are responsible for the debt." I asked what my options were. She said I could try to negotiate with the bank, offer a settlement, maybe pay 60-70% of the total, and have them write off the rest. Or I could refuse to pay and let them take legal action, which would mean a court case, which would probably end with a judgment against me anyway, plus legal fees. Or I could declare bankruptcy in Thailand, which would destroy my visa status and probably get me blacklisted. None of these options were good. I asked about prosecuting Fern for fraud. Sutita shook her head. She said unless I could prove Fern had forged documents and I couldn't, because the shops had photocopies of my passport and the signatures on the guarantor forms looked enough like mine that a handwriting expert would have a hard time definitively calling them forgeries. The police wouldn't pursue it. She said this kind of thing happens all the time. Thai woman marries foreign man, takes out credit in his name, defaults, disappears. The police see it as a civil matter, not criminal. The banks get their money from the guarantor and everyone moves on except the foreign man who's left holding the bill. I asked Sutita how much it would cost to negotiate with the bank. She said her fee would be 80,000 baht, plus any settlement amount we agreed on. I did the math. That was 1,800 pounds just for the lawyer, plus whatever the bank would accept. If they settled for 70% of 9.8 million, that was 6.86 million baht, or 154,000 pounds. Add the lawyer fees, and I was looking at 156,000 pounds minimum, and that was just the first loan. The second loan, the 2.1 million baht one, was with a different shop and a different financing company. Sutita said we'd have to negotiate that separately. I went home and I looked at my bank account. The savings were at 232,000 pounds. I'd been so busy worrying about the overall decline that I hadn't noticed it had dropped another 8,000 pounds in the past month. I checked the transaction history. There were withdrawals I didn't remember making. Small ones, 5,000 baht here, 3,000 baht there. ATM withdrawals from machines in Chonburi. Fern had my ATM card. She'd been taking money right up until the day she left. I'd been so destroyed by the loan revelation that I hadn't even thought to check for that. I called the bank to cancel the card. They said they'd already flagged the account due to the guarantor situation and frozen any outgoing transfers over 10,000 baht. The ATM card was still active though. I told them to deactivate it immediately. The customer service representative said it would take 24 hours. By the time the card was deactivated, another 12,000 baht had been withdrawn. About 270 pounds. In the grand scheme of things, 270 pounds was nothing compared to the 264,000 pounds in gold shop debt, but it felt like a final insult. Like she was taking whatever last scraps she could get before the carcass was completely picked clean. I need to tell you something about what it feels like to lose this much money. It's not like losing your wallet, or even like losing a job. It's more like finding out you have a terminal illness. There's the initial shock, and then there's the creeping realization that your entire future has just been rewritten without your consent. I was 66 years old. The savings I'd spent 4 decades building were about to be cut in half, maybe more than half, to pay off debt I didn't even know I had. My pension of 1,800 pounds a month was enough to live on modestly, but it wasn't enough to rebuild savings, which meant I'd be living month to month for the rest of my life. No buffer. No emergencies allowed. No safety net. And the worst part, the part that made me wake up at 4 a.m. with my heart racing, was that I'd done this to myself. Fern hadn't held a gun to my head. She hadn't drugged me or hypnotized me or used some kind of black magic. She'd simply asked for things, and I'd said yes, over and over and over, because saying no would have meant admitting the relationship was a transaction, and I couldn't admit that. Because if the relationship was a transaction, then I was a lonely old man paying for companionship, and that made me pathetic. Sutita negotiated with both banks over the course of 3 months. The first bank, Krungsri, agreed to settle for 7.2 million baht instead of 9.8 million. That's about 161,000 pounds. Still catastrophic, but better than the full amount. The second bank wouldn't budge. They wanted the full 2.1 million baht, 47,000 pounds, or they'd pursue legal action. In total, I paid 210,000 pounds to settle both loans. That dropped my savings from 232,000 pounds to 22,000 pounds. I also paid Sutita 4,000 pounds in legal fees. That left me with 18,000 pounds in savings and my 1,800 pounds monthly pension. At 66 years old, I was essentially starting over. I never saw Fern again. I tried calling her once, about 2 weeks after she left, but her number was disconnected. I messaged her online, but the messages never showed as delivered. I thought about going to her mother's house in Chonburi, but Sutita advised against it. She said if I showed up there, they could claim I was harassing them and get a restraining order, which would complicate the debt negotiations. So I didn't go. I just sat in the condo and wondered if Fern was there, living in her mother's house, sleeping in her childhood bed, maybe laughing about how she'd taken the stupid farang for £210,000. I did some digging online. I found a Facebook profile that looked like it might be her same name, same age. Profile picture was too blurry to be sure. The profile showed she was in a relationship as of May 2023, 2 months after she left me. The new boyfriend's profile picture showed a Western man, older, maybe in his 60s. White hair, big smile, arm around a Thai woman who might have been Fern. I couldn't be sure. I didn't want to be sure. I sold the gold I'd bought her that I could account for the few pieces she'd left behind or forgotten about. That came to about 180,000 baht, roughly £4,000. It didn't make a dent in what I'd lost, but it was something. I thought about leaving Thailand, going back to England, but what would I go back to? A one-bedroom flat in a gray city where I didn't know anyone anymore? At least in Thailand my pension stretched further. At least the weather was warm. At least I could pretend I was still living the dream, even if the dream had turned into a nightmare. Here's what I've learned, and I need you to hear this if you're thinking of doing what I did. The warning signs were there from the beginning. Fern's interest in gold wasn't cultural appreciation, it was material obsession. Her family's constant emergencies weren't bad luck, they were a coordinated extraction strategy. Her lack of employment after COVID wasn't economic hardship, it was a calculated decision to make me the sole income source. I saw all of this. I saw it happening in real time, and I explained it away because I wanted the relationship to be real more than I wanted to protect myself. The rules in Thailand aren't different from the rules anywhere else. People who want to take advantage of you will do so if you let them. The cultural context changes the tactics, but it doesn't change the underlying dynamic. Love and money cannot be separated in relationships where there's a massive economic imbalance. You can tell yourself they can be. You can tell yourself your situation is different. You can tell yourself she really loves you. But underneath it all, the money is always there, shaping everything. Even when you pretend it isn't. I'm still in Thailand. I'm still in the same condo in Jomtien. The ceiling fan still clicks. I finally fixed it last month. Turns out it just needed a new screw, something I could have done in 10 minutes 2 years ago if I'd bothered to look at it. That feels like a metaphor for something, but I'm too tired to figure out what. I'm 66 years old. I have £18,000 in savings and a pension that covers rent and food and not much else. I will never retire comfortably. I will never buy a house. I will probably never be in another relationship because I don't trust myself to make good decisions about women anymore. The gold shops got their money. Fern got her gold. The lawyers got their fees. I got a story about how I lost £264,000 to someone I thought loved me. If you're reading this and you're thinking about marrying a Thai woman 30 years younger than you, and she keeps asking about gold, and her family keeps having emergencies, and you keep telling yourself it's just cultural differences, please, I'm begging you, stop. Stop before you sign anything. Stop before you let your name go on any documents. Stop before you give her access to your bank account or your ATM card or your passport information. Just stop. I didn't stop because I was lonely, and I wanted to believe in something. That's what it comes down to. I wanted to believe that someone could love me, not despite my age, but because of who I was. I wanted to believe that the money didn't matter. I wanted to believe I was special, that I'd found the one good one, that my story would be different from all the other stories. I wasn't special. My story isn't different. The money always mattered, and now it's gone. The worst part isn't the money, though. The worst part is that I feel relieved. Genuinely, deeply relieved. When the bank called me that Tuesday morning and told me about the 9.8 million baht in debt, I felt my stomach drop, and my hands shake, and my whole world collapse. But underneath that, deeper than that, there was relief. Because it meant I didn't have to pretend anymore. I didn't have to convince myself the relationship was real. I didn't have to justify the next gold purchase or the next family emergency or the next time Fern looked at me like I was an ATM with legs. It was over. The game was done. I'd lost, but at least I didn't have to keep playing. I don't know if that makes sense to anyone else. I don't know if you can understand how losing £264,000 could feel like liberation. But it did. It does. I wake up in the morning and I check my bank account, and I see £18,000 sitting there, and I think, well, at least I know what I have now. At least there are no more surprises. At least Fern isn't going to call me tonight asking for money for her mother's surgery or her brother's business or another 3 baht of gold. The bleeding has stopped. The wound is catastrophic, but it's clean. I'm telling you this because I don't want you to make the same mistake I did. Not the mistake of trusting someone. That's a risk we all have to take sometimes. The mistake of ignoring reality because reality was too painful to confront. I knew, somewhere deep down, that Fern was with me for financial security. I knew her affection was conditional on my ability to provide. I knew the gold purchases were excessive, and the family emergencies were convenient, and the timing of everything was suspicious. I knew all of this, and I chose not to know it, because not knowing felt safer than knowing. But here's the thing. Not knowing doesn't keep you safe. It just delays the inevitable moment when reality crashes through your carefully constructed denial and forces you to see what was always there. And when that moment comes, you've already spent the money. You've already signed the documents. You've already put your name on loans you didn't know existed. The damage is already done. So if you're in this situation right now, if you're reading this and thinking, but my girlfriend is different, or, but I've already invested so much, or, but she really does love me, stop. Stop and ask yourself, if the money disappeared tomorrow, would she still be here? Be honest, really honest, because that answer will tell you everything you need to know. I asked myself that question 3 years too late. And now I'm 66 years old with £18,000 to my name and a clicking ceiling fan that I finally fixed because there's nothing else left to fix. That's my story. That's how I lost £264,000 to a gold shop debt I never knew about. I hope yours ends differently.